My name is Fred Winter, and I'd like to thank you for participating in today's webinar. Welcome to the Spring 2023 Implementation Overview for Invest in Kids Act Schools, focusing on the SAT with SA Before the Test, Part 1. A copy of today's presentation is located on ISBE's Invest in Kids Act assessment page. This webinar was developed by the College Board. This session will focus on implementation items that occur prior, during, and after the primary test date. Our goal in this overview is to share the latest information about the IIKA SAT with SA assessment based on current planning. The items we will cover today include an overview of the SAT with SA administration, what's new in 2023, staff roles and responsibilities, before the test, on test day and after the test, and then we will close with some key takeaways and contact information. Part 2 will cover information about the Invest in Kids Act PSAT 10 and PSAT 8-9 administration, the establishment process, ordering, accommodations and supports, invoicing, and again closing with key takeaways and contact information. So let's begin with an overview of the SAT with SA specifically for Invest in Kids Act, or IIKA, schools. ISBE, through the Illinois Invest in Kids Act, requires all scholarship recipients attending a private school in grade 9 to take the PSAT 8-9, those in grade 10 to take the PSAT 10, and those in grade 11 to take the SAT with SA. Also note, accommodation requests must still be entered via College Board's SSD online system. IIKA schools are responsible for covering the cost of all assessments. For example, the SAT with SA is $46 per tested student. The Invest in Kids Act requires that scholarship recipients shall be annually assessed at the qualified school where the student attends school in the same manner in which students that attend public schools are annually assessed, pursuant to Section 2(3.64)(a)(5) of the School Code, and that such qualified schools shall pay costs associated with this requirement. For the 2022-23 school year, ISBE will serve as the conduit through which IIKA schools must order the SAT with SA standard materials in order to access the SA portion, which is not available except through the state. The SAT is a nationally recognized college entrance exam. Every student who takes SAT can send their scores to up to 4 colleges for free at the time of testing. Income-eligible students receive unlimited score sends over the student's testing lifetime and college application fee waivers to participating colleges. Through their College Board accounts, students have online access to all their College Board scores in one reporting portal. College Board partnerships with Big Future and Road Trip Nation provide students with resources to help them match their interests with careers and college majors. Students can take advantage of scholarship opportunities while planning for college. By opting in to the College Board's Student Search Service and filling out the optional questionnaire, students taking the SAT can be matched with colleges and scholarship opportunities. In the following section, let's discuss key dates test coordinators should be aware of as they prepare for testing. For spring 2023 testing in Illinois, the testing dates are as follows. The primary test date for the SAT with SA is Wednesday, April 12th. The SAT with SA accommodated testing window is April 12th through April 25th. The makeup test date is Tuesday, April 25th. The alternate schedule for SAT with SA was selected by your building principal or test coordinator during the fall establishment process and is only available for schools that could not feasibly administer the SAT with SA on the April administration dates. The alternate SAT with SA primary test date is Wednesday, March 22nd. The alternate accommodated testing window is from March 22nd through April 4th. The alternate makeup test date is April 25th. Other key implementation dates include the following. The off-site testing request deadline is January 20th for all schools who will require extra return kits to accommodate sending materials back from their off-site testing locations. The state-allowed accommodations and English learners' time and a half request window is from January 9th through February 21st for schools testing SAT with essay during the April primary administration, and January 9th through January 31st for schools testing SAT with essay during the March alternate primary administration. The College Board approved accommodations request deadline is February 21st for schools testing SAT with essay during the April primary administration and January 31st for schools testing SAT with essay during the March alternate primary administration. Coordinator planning kits will arrive in schools no later than March 3rd for schools testing SAT with essay during the April primary administration, and no later than February 10th for schools testing SAT with essay during the March alternate primary administration. Required Test Coordinator Test Day online training will launch in early March for schools testing SAT with essay during the April primary administration, and mid-February for schools testing SAT with essay during the March alternate primary administration. All required Test Coordinator Test Day online training should be completed at least 1 week prior to test day. Pre-administration materials will arrive in schools no later than March 17th for schools testing SAT with essay during the April primary administration, and no later than March 3rd for schools testing SAT with essay during the March alternate primary administration. Schools should conduct pre-administration sessions in early April for schools testing SAT with essay during the April primary administration, and in mid-March for schools testing SAT with essay during the March alternate primary administration. Test materials will arrive in schools around March 28th through the 30th for schools testing SAT with essay during the April primary administration, and around March 14th through the 16th for schools testing SAT with essay during the March alternate primary administration. SAT with essay primary test administration dates are April 12th or March 22nd for those schools testing on the alternate administration. SAT with essay accommodated testing window dates are April 12th through April 25th or March 22nd through April 4th for those schools testing on the alternate administration. Schools should provide counts for makeup testing for SAT with essay only between April 12th and 14th for schools that tested SAT with essay on the April primary administration, and between March 22nd and March 24th for schools that tested SAT with essay during the March alternate primary administration. The deadline to ship SAT with essay primary materials and answer sheets for scoring is April 14th for schools that tested SAT with essay on the April primary administration, and March 24th for schools that tested SAT with essay during the March alternate primary administration. The deadline to ship SAT with essay accommodated materials and answer sheets for scoring is April 26th for schools that tested SAT with essay during the April accommodated testing window, and April 5th for schools that tested SAT with essay during the March alternate accommodated testing window. The SAT with essay makeup test date is April 25th for all schools. The deadline to ship SAT with essay makeup materials and answer sheets for scoring is April 26th. In this section, we'll cover items that are new in school year 2023 for SAT with essay. Changes and updates for spring 2023 include the master student list is now referred to as the school-wide student list. The pre-recorded audio script is now script 5, not script 6. An off-site request survey is only required if extra return kits are needed. The non-standard administration report, otherwise known as the NAR, has been redesigned and updated. It will be available beginning in late January. Highlights of the new NAR include that it's available continuously beginning late January of 2023, and it can be generated as a PDF or a CSV file now. In this section, we'll cover staff roles and responsibilities for administering SAT with SA. There are several testing staff roles that work together to make an administration successful. The test coordinator is responsible for all aspects of the SAT with SA administration at the school. The Services for Students with Disabilities, or SSD coordinator, requests accommodations for students and supports the test coordinator to oversee accommodated testing. The proctor administers the test in a specific testing room. The room monitor assists the proctor with monitoring students in the testing room. And the hall monitor keeps hallways near testing area quiet and secure on test day. There are requirements that test day staff must adhere to. Test day staff cannot be involved with paid coaching or paid SAT preparation. Test day staff cannot have taken the SAT within 180 days of the administration date. Any staff member, including the test coordinator who will have access to test books before test day, must not have a child or member of their household taking the same College Board test in the same window at any test site. And all individuals, including any backup coordinators and/or proctors, must review and sign the SAT Testing Staff Agreement form. The test coordinator is responsible for all aspects of the school day administration at a school, and these include planning rooms and managing staff for test day, receiving and securing all test materials, including test materials for students testing with accommodations, managing testing within the school and supervising all activities related to testing, including accommodated testing, collecting, packing, and returning test materials, completing test day forms, and ordering SAT with SA makeup materials, acting as the main contact between the College Board and the school, receiving all communication from the College Board, and identifying at least one backup test coordinator. The Services for Students with Disabilities, or SSD coordinator, is responsible for being the school's liaison within the College Board's Services for Students with Disabilities office, submitting SAT with SA accommodation requests for all students who require them, accessing and printing the non-standard administration report, and assisting the test coordinator in determining rooms and staff required for administering the test with accommodations, and partnering with the test coordinator to reconcile accommodated testing materials and administering the SAT with SA to students who are testing with accommodations. Note that schools may have more than one SSD coordinator. However, one person will be identified as the primary SSD coordinator who will receive communications from College Board. Proctors are responsible for managing all activities that happen in the testing room. Each room requires one proctor. Proctor responsibilities include monitoring students by maintaining a fair testing environment, admitting and seating students, and enforcing policies, and administering the test by distributing tests and answer sheets and reading the scripts verbatim. Room monitors and hall monitors are responsible for assisting the test coordinator and proctors. Room monitor responsibilities include helping with test site setup and admission, answering questions, helping distribute test materials, and monitoring test takers and reporting violations. Hall monitor responsibilities include helping with test site setup and admission, directing students to rooms, patrolling halls and reporting violations, and covering for staff on breaks. In this section, we'll cover items to prepare for before the test. First, we'll focus on preparing your school. Based on the establishment survey responses, schools will be assigned a 6-digit school code representing the attending institution, or AI code. AI codes are required to pre-ID students, administer College Board exams, apply for student accommodations, and receive materials and student exam scores. AI codes are 6-digit numbers that are unique to your school. Coordinators will receive confirmation of their school's AI code in January. If your school participated last spring, or if your school administered other College Board assessments, your AI code will remain the same. For registration and material ordering, registration and pre-identification will be completed by ISB via the pre-ID process. IIKA schools were instructed to send a pre-ID file to Robert Potempa at ISB containing the students who are taking SAT with Essay by December 16th. Pre-ID labels for student answer sheets will be shipped for all students who were included in the pre-ID file. The College Board will determine your standard test materials order based on the number of students at each grade level in the pre-ID file and the students approved for accommodations via College Board's SSD online system. Schools will not place orders for materials in the test order system. College Board will ship a small overage of test materials to account for standby test takers, typically students who transferred into the school after the pre-ID deadline. They will not have a pre-ID label and will need to bubble in their demographic information on their answer sheet. Off-site testing locations allow students to be tested at a location other than their high school. Some reasons that may require an off-site testing location include your school doesn't have a suitable physical location, your school doesn't have enough room to test all students, or you need to test students who are not permitted to return to the high school grounds, for example, expelled students, and will need to test at an alternate location. Only submit an off-site request if you are returning test materials from the off-site location. If you're consolidating test materials to return from the high school, you don't need to submit an off-site request. All off-site return kits requests are due by January 20th. Schools must call the Illinois Educator Support Line for late requests after this deadline is passed. Schools and districts that submit their off-site return kit requests on time will receive their return kits with their other test materials. To submit requests for off-site testing, school staff must complete and submit the online form at the URL here on the screen with the required information for each off-site location if they require a separate return kit. The submitter will receive an email confirmation of request, and it is important to save this email. The College Board is committed to making sure that students with disabilities can take the exams with the accommodations they need, and will consider all requests to ensure that we measure students' academic abilities regardless of their disabilities. Accommodation requests will be submitted by the SSD coordinator through College Board's Services for Students with Disabilities, or SSD, online system. Now there are two types. There's College Board approved accommodations. Students with approved accommodations will receive college reportable scores. Once approved for accommodations, with limited exceptions, a student remains approved for all College Board tests. And state-allowed accommodations. These are state-specific accommodations. Students, schools, and the state will receive scores, however, the scores are not college reportable. These accommodations apply to state testing only and are requested for each state administration. Each school should have an SSD coordinator to request accommodations for students with disabilities. If your school needs to appoint a new SSD coordinator, that person can gain access to the SSD online system by completing the SSD coordinator form, which is found at the link on this slide. The AI code is required to gain access to the SSD online system. For schools that don't yet have an AI code from College Board, accommodation requests can be made once you receive the AI code. Test coordinators and SSD coordinators will need to work together to ensure a smooth testing experience for students testing with accommodations. An on-demand version of an accommodations overview providing details about using SSD online and applying for testing accommodations is available now for SSD coordinators and is hyperlinked here on the slide. Each school should follow state and district procedures for collecting consent to request accommodations for students with disabilities, and also for English learners as applicable. Copies of consent forms can be downloaded from collegeboard.org using the URL on the slide. Accommodations requests are submitted by each school's SSD coordinator via SSD Online. The deadlines to request accommodations in SSD Online are as follows. The College Board Accommodations Request deadline is February 21st for schools testing SAT with Essay during the April primary administration, and January 31st for schools testing SAT with Essay during the March alternate primary administration. The State Allowed Accommodations and EL Time and a Half requests window is from January 9th through February 21st for schools testing SAT with Essay during the April primary administration, and January 9th through January 31st for schools testing SAT with Essay during the March alternate primary administration. The request deadline is February 28th for schools testing SAT with Essay during the April primary administration, and February 7th for schools testing SAT with Essay during the March alternate primary administration. The late request deadline is for the following specific scenarios only: students who are newly enrolled at a school, students who are newly classified at an eligible grade level, or students who have a newly identified disability. Schools for which accommodations requests are not submitted on time may not receive materials on time. English learners may utilize EL supports for spring 2023 testing. These supports include use of an approved word-to-word bilingual dictionary, use of translated test directions, and time and a half. Students may use one or any of these supports in combination. Students will receive college reportable scores when any of these supports are used. College Board offers English learner supports including use of approved word-to-word bilingual dictionaries and translated test directions. The list includes approximately 100 word-to-word bilingual dictionaries. Use of word-to-word bilingual dictionary does not require an approval by College Board. The approved list is available on ISB's Invest in Kids Act page, which is hyperlinked here on the slide. Translated test directions will be available in PDF format for each assessment. Schools must print the directions for students. No printed test directions will come with test materials. Translated test directions are available in the languages listed here on the slide. Use of bilingual dictionaries and translated test directions do not require approval by College Board. All translations will be available to print on ISB's Invest in Kids Act website in February. For students using time and a half as an English learner support, they will receive time and a half on each section of the assessment, and students must sit for the entire time allotted and cannot go ahead in the test even if they're the only one testing. Although not an accommodation, EL students requiring time and a half will need to be identified in SSD Online. Schools can request time and a half for ELs starting January 9th through the English Learner Support Dashboard in SSD Online. Students will be automatically approved and no supporting documentation is required. EL students using time and a half can be tested with accommodated students who use the same timing and test materials. Now, let's focus on preparing yourself. Test coordinators are required to complete the mandatory online test coordinator training. They should read the coordinator's manual. Test coordinators should distribute testing room manuals to proctors and SSD coordinators for their review ahead of test day, and review the contents of the coordinator's planning kit. Online coordinators test administration training. SAT with Essay test coordinators are required to participate in annual test day coordinator online training, which will be emailed and available online by early March. Test coordinators will receive an email with a link to access the mandatory online training. Once accessed, the training will be available through your College Board professional account. Share the link with other staff as necessary. Other test day staff will need to complete the online test day training provided for their role or be trained by their test coordinator. Please ensure that staff are trained at least 1 week prior to test day. Now let's discuss building your lists. Test coordinators will create student lists and room rosters to use, and this is done at the local level. Test coordinators will work with the SSD online coordinator to understand how many students will be testing with accommodations. More information about creating rosters will be in the coordinator manuals. The Non-Standard Administration Report, or NAR, which is printed from SSD Online by the SSD coordinator, will be the roster of all students testing with accommodations. New for spring 2023 is an updated NAR. In addition to a more streamlined design, new features include the ability to export the NAR into either a CSV or a PDF. As mentioned before, the Non-Standard Administration Report has been improved for spring training. The NAR lists all students approved for accommodations, groups students that must test on the primary test day, and those who may test in the accommodated window. Includes the test book color the students should use. Includes students testing with EL time and a half. And new for 2023 can be exported to Excel and PDF, as I mentioned. No longer includes script numbers, and it's the same NAR for all tests in the SAT suite. Now let's discuss planning your space. The size of cohort testing and the size of rooms used for testing will determine the number of rooms needed. Options for rooms include larger spaces, such as auditoriums and gymnasiums, and smaller spaces such as classrooms. Consider the following when choosing the location of testing rooms within the building. Testing rooms should be separated from other classes on different schedules or taking different assessments. In locations that minimize noise and other disruptions when classes or other assessments break. In locations with minimal noise and distractions from outside the building, and in locations with easy access to restrooms. The following list outlines seating and furniture requirements. Chairs must have backs, chairs must face in the same direction, and they must be placed directly behind those in the preceding row. Each student must be separated by a minimum of 3 feet from right to left, measured from the center of the desk. And staff access to every student must be unimpeded. Please review the following seating and furniture requirements as you prepare your space for the spring administration. As an example, at tables, students must be seated at least 3 feet apart, measured from the center of the table, and facing the same direction. You can seat 2 students at a table that's at least 6 feet long. Next, we'll discuss planning your staff. When planning for staffing needs, each school should plan on 1 test coordinator and 1 SSD coordinator. The additional staffing needed depends upon the size of the cohort testing, the number of testing rooms, and the number of students in each room. Formulas are available in the coordinator manual. Check with your school or district for policies around who can act as testing staff. Some schools utilize aides, paras, substitutes, and coaches. Please contact School Day Support by phone or email if you need to make a change to the person appointed to the test coordinator or SSD coordinator roles, or if the principal of the school has changed. When planning your staff, consider the following. Every testing room requires 1 proctor. Unless your school day tests only a few students, you'll need additional staff to assist the proctor. For rooms with more than 34 students, assign room monitors to help according to the tables listed here. And for every 5 testing rooms, assign 1 hall monitor. Here's an example staffing scenario. Your school is testing 100 grade 11 standard testers for SAT school day. You have 4 classrooms available, each with a capacity for 25 students. So you're going to need 6 staff, 1 test coordinator, 4 proctors, and 1 hall monitor. In this scenario, we have the same 100 grade 11 standard testers for SAT school day, but you plan to test in 1 large room, like a cafeteria or the gym, so you're going to need 5 staff, 1 test coordinator and 1 proctor, 2 room monitors, and 1 hall monitor. Let's review key takeaways from Part 1. For the 2022-23 school year, ISB will submit the roster SAT with SA. For more details regarding who is required to test, visit the Invest in Kids Act page on the ISB website. All registration and pre-identification and standard materials ordering will be completed by ISB. Schools will be sent materials based on the pre-ID file sent to Robert Potempa on December 16th. A small overage of materials will be sent along with the test order to accommodate for any late registrations. Accommodation requests must be submitted in SSD Online by your school's SSD coordinator approximately 8 weeks prior to test day. SAT with SA, PSAT 10, and PSAT 8-9 test coordinators must participate in annual test day training, which will be sent via email and available approximately 8 weeks prior to test day. Check the Spring 2023 General Timeline for a detailed outline of important dates and deadlines related to Spring 2023 testing. If you have any questions about implementation or planning or materials shipments, the Illinois Educator Support Team is here to help. Call the College Board phone line at 844-688-9995 or email the Illinois College Board team at ilsat@collegeboard.org. If you have questions about ISB policy, contact Robert Potempa, Principal Consultant for Invest in Kids Act. You may also find the latest information at the Invest in Kids Act assessment page, and the URL is listed here on the slide. Thank you for listening.